Hello Goblins, it's Chris, Eldritch Pipes. We're here for episodes 3 and 4 of The Whisperer in Darkness. I am going to be smoking some Balkan Sobrani in the Slenderman pencil shank, which is kind of my favourite working pipe at the moment. And I'm going to be working on this reading pipe. It's needs drilling and the top parts and the shank turning somewhat. So we've got a long way to go. We might be at the lathe for both parts of the story actually, depending on how things go. But without further ado, episode 3, The Whisper in Darkness.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Tuesday, 7th of May. It's 11:04 a.m. The broadcast came through at about 3 o'clock this morning. I can't be precise about when it started, but it woke me up just after 3. It was the same content, but I think the voice has changed. Can't be sure. I tried to cut in on the frequency, but no one responded. I overslept, and when I woke up, there was a black car parked in the lane across from me. I couldn't see who was inside, and I don't know how long they'd been there. I came out the front door, and they drove away. A few minutes ago, I looked out the window, and Walter Brown was standing at the gate, staring up at the house. When he saw me, he said something that I couldn't hear, and then he turned and walked away.
Okay, this is not... You can shut up. From this window, I can't see down to the front door. And it's too dark out there anyway. Who's there? Calm down. Calm down, calm down. Something heavy. Something sharp. Okay. Now I'm going to confront the Martian invaders with a rolling pin and a pair of scissors. Listen to me. I'm armed and the police are on their way. That's better. Now I want you to step away from the front door. Shit. What now? Huh. There's no one here. Get to the car. Just get to the car. Go.
Kennedy drove straight back to London without stopping. The next morning, she played me the recording, and we went across the road to the cafe to talk it all through.
So, what was it?
I didn't see anything.
Okay.
I didn't imagine something banging on the door. The door's actually shaking. And anyway, you heard it on the tape.
And when you opened the door, there was nothing there.
You heard the tape?
Yeah, I'm just...
Sorry, I didn't sleep too well.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
I don't know if there was anything there. I ran like hell for the car and drove away. I didn't look back. Maybe it was kids.
At that time of night. And I don't think you get freaked out by kids playing games. Anyway, we don't know what it was. I'm interested in the radio broadcast.
It sounded like a number station to me.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
In case you don't know, number stations are shortwave radio broadcasts, usually consisting of a recording of someone reading out a series of numbers. It's generally believed that these are coded instructions being broadcast to spies in the field. Number stations were used a lot in the Cold War, and some of them are still going today. No one knows where most of them broadcast from or to. The whole thing is kind of spooky. The most famous is one known as the Lincolnshire Poacher, which goes like this. So it's a whole weird thing. You can hear hundreds of these online, and the more you listen to them, the stranger the world seems. Anyway, what Kennedy had heard in Henry Akeley's house sounded like one of these.
Except I don't think they were numbers.
It certainly didn't sound like English. I was going to play it to a few people and see if anyone could tell us what language it's in.
You know the hotel where we stayed in Orford? There's a plaque on the wall of the building.
Yeah, the guys who invented radar stayed there.
Right. They were working on a facility in Orford, just across the river. That whole place was a top-secret weapons testing facility for most of the 20th century.
Was it still operating in 1980?
I think parts of it were. And there was a radio transmitter. That could have been used to broadcast number stations.
It's not still working now, is it?
Supposedly not. But it means that there were people in the area, maybe still around, who would know how to put a broadcast like that together.
Do you think it could have been something from Orford Ness? Some kind of experimental craft that the US Air Force guys saw in the forest?
Maybe. And Henry Akeley and Amelia Fenner and whoever else, they're in that field dancing around naked or whatever they're doing, off their faces on hallucinogens.
And something crashes or lands or whatever, and they think it's these angels they've summoned.
It ties some things together.
Well, it doesn't explain whatever was trying to get into Henry Akeley's house last night.
Well. But other people were there that night in 1980 for the ritual. It only takes one of them to have fallen out with Henry Akeley and to know that this is exactly how you'd freak him out.
I had the photographs that I'd taken of Henry Akeley's walls on my laptop, so we pulled up the picture from the local paper, the one we'd first spotted Amelia Fenner in. Under the headline, "Local People Witness Alien Landing," there was a group shot of 5 people: Amelia Fenner, Henry Akeley, and 3 others.
Does it give the names of the others?
The caption just identifies them as members of an amateur astrology club.
I think that cover's blown.
It only quotes a guy called Thomas Marston in the text. Doesn't say who the others are.
Kennedy wanted to head back to Suffolk and track down the other members of Amelia Fenner's group. We thought we should also find out more about this man, Walter Brown, that Henry Akeley kept referring to. I was intrigued by the radio broadcast we'd heard, and I had a couple of people I wanted to talk to about that. I think back then we'd both had a sense that we had started making real progress in unravelling, if not what had happened to Henry Akeley, then at least the circumstances leading up to his disappearance. We were quite wrong. I'm Matthew Hayward, and this is The Whisperer in Darkness.
I just called on Albert Wilmarth at the vicarage, but there's no one there. I'm hoping I'm going to find him in the church.
Hello again.
Am I disturbing anything?
No, just tidying up. Just takes about a minute. It's not like we have a large and raucous congregation. You recording this?
Is that okay? I tend to record everything because you never know what's going to happen.
Well, I'll be discreet about the parishioners.
I was hoping you could tell me who the people are in this photo.
Where did this come from?
It was on the wall in Henry Akeley's spare room. Does anyone else have a key to his house?
I wouldn't know, I'm afraid. Why?
The other night, I drove by on my way back to London. I told Albert about what happened that night. The suspected intruder, the broadcast.
Well, this was the broadcast Henry wanted me to hear.
I don't know, I guess so.
What was it?
We're trying to figure that out. It sounded like nonsense. A recording of a child saying, well, sounds really. Do you know what a number station is?
I don't.
Okay. Well, we're looking into it. And while I was there, something came to the door.
Something?
Well, almost certainly someone, but it was freaky. They were hammering on the door, and when I opened it, there was no one there. I don't know what reaction I was expecting, but Albert Wilmarth just nodded like this was something that happened all the time. You don't seem surprised.
I think I'm relieved, in a way.
Relieved?
Well, I thought Henry was losing his mind. But I didn't do anything. I didn't call anyone because I thought talking to me was helping. I should have done more. But if something was really going on, then Henry wasn't delusional.
He's still missing.
Yes, of course, yes.
I think the people in this picture might know something.
Oh, my glasses, 1 second. Right, well, this is Henry, obviously, and Amelia Fenner. And this chap here is Thomas Marston.
Do you know where I can find him?
Yes, he's about 20 yards that way. He's buried here. He died about 5 years ago.
How did he die?
He took his own life, I'm afraid. He hanged himself. I didn't realise he'd been in this group with Henry. I never saw them together, and Henry never mentioned him to me. And this is Walter Brown.
The neighbour?
Well, I suppose in the rural sense he's the neighbour. His house is about half a mile from Henry's, but I'd avoid Walter if I were you.
Why?
Because well, on tape I'd say he's not the friendliest man in the area.
And if I turn the tape off?
It's not really my place to speak ill of anyone. The police can probably provide you with more information on Walter.
Henry talks about him on his recordings.
I imagine he does.
Okay.
Now, this woman here, I've seen her. I just can't place her. Wait, yes I can. It's Dunwich. I don't know her name, but she works in the little museum at Dunwich.
Is it too early for a drink?
It's 10 o'clock in the morning.
I'll have a Bloody Mary. Spicy. Well, it's lunchtime somewhere.
Just a black coffee, please. Ben runs a company that makes high-end current affairs documentaries for television. He also has a somewhat murky past working as some kind of liaison between the armed forces and the intelligence services. I got in touch through a mutual acquaintance, and Ben was intrigued by the radio broadcast Kennedy had recorded at the Akeley house. He suggested we meet at his club on Pall Mall.
Well, it certainly sounds like something. Not sure it's one of ours. Where did you record it?
Well, we don't know where it was broadcasting from, but my colleague heard it on a private shortwave radio up in Suffolk. I wondered if it might be something to do with Orford Ness.
Did you indeed? What do you know of Orford Ness?
Well, I know it was a weapons testing facility.
What?
And I know it's where they develop radar.
Quite true.
And I know there's been some talk of Orford Ness being somehow tied in with the Rendlesham Forest incident.
Uh-huh.
Yes?
Well, having acquainted myself with your series on the case of Charles Dexter
Ward.
I imagine something like Rendlesham would be the focus.
Look, it's not the focus, but it might be related. The man whose radio we heard this on went missing a few months ago, and we're trying to
Yes, I see. Yeah, I'm not your man, I'm afraid.
Oh, I was
Well, I can
told...
talk about what went on militarily at Orford Ness, the declassified stuff at least. But the military left Orford in 1993. Nothing relevant to you after that. No strange broadcasts or lights in the sky or what have you.
Okay. Do you know someone...
I'm afraid not. Oh, time does fly, doesn't it? Well, good to meet you, Mr. Hayward. I wish you luck.
In the Middle Ages, Dunwich was a port the size of London, with a population of several thousand. Then a series of heavy storms and ongoing sea erosion destroyed the town. Most of it now lies beneath sand and silt and the murky North Sea. Today, the population of what remains of Dunwich is under 200. There's a pub and a tea room and a museum which tells the story of the town as it was. In that museum, I'm hoping to find the mystery woman from the UFO news clipping.
You see here on the model, this area here was...
Instantly, I walk into the place I see her. The museum is small, just one room, and there's a model of Dunwich, as it would have looked, in the centre. Some tourists are studying the model, and the woman talking to them is unmistakably the woman in the photograph with Henry Akeley. As I approach, I see she's wearing a name tag. Hi. Tanya Ratcliffe.
Hello, welcome to Dunwich.
Thank you. I wondered if I could talk to you for a few minutes.
About the model?
About a man called Henry Akeley.
I'm sorry, I don't know anyone by that name.
Or Amelia Fenner?
I think you may have me confused with someone else.
I didn't have her confused with anyone, and I could tell from her reaction that she knew exactly who I was talking about. I'm working on a podcast series about the disappearance of Henry Akeley.
I'm sorry, I'm on duty here, and I have people...
Well, when do you take a break? I could buy you a cup of tea.
No, I'm sorry, I'm very busy, and I have no idea who these people are. I'm sorry.
I've been called a lot of things, but easily deterred is not one of them. I went into the pub next door, found myself a seat by the window, and hooked up to their Wi-Fi to do some homework on Tanya Ratcliffe. I didn't think a woman in her 60s would be a heavy presence on social media, but actually, Tanya was more than pulling her weight. There was a Twitter account that mainly seemed to have stuff to do with the museum, Instagram for the same purpose, and a Facebook account which she used to keep in touch with some cousins in New Zealand, and she belonged to a couple of pagan groups that seemed pretty inept and harmless. Then it occurred to me that the museum might have its own Wi-Fi network. It was only next door, so I'd be within range. I looked it up, and there it was. But it was passworded, and hacking into other people's Wi-Fi is not something I can do in a rush. So I called Slide.
All right, Kay, what do you need?
Slide is not his real name. He's a guy I call when I need something done that's technical, but not technically legal. I've got a Wi-Fi network that's in range, but is passworded, and I want to know if a particular person's phone is currently connected to it.
Okay. I'm emailing you a link you need to click to let me piggyback your laptop.
Got it.
All right, let's see what we have.
It took Slide about 90 seconds to get into the museum's Wi-Fi network.
Well, I've got 5 phones signed on. Who are you after?
Tanya Ratcliffe.
Tanya's phone, there it is. What do you need?
I don't know yet.
All right. Well, there's not much here. Looks like mostly work stuff.
Recent calls. Has she been in touch with a guy called Henry Akeley, Akeley, in the past few months?
Let's see. No, his name's in her contact list, but no recent calls, texts, or emails.
Oh, she's hiding something. Can you send me the whole contact list?
It is on its way.
All right, thanks, Slide.
We done?
We're done.
Have a good one.
I scrolled down the list of Tanya's contacts, not really expecting to find anything. And then I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Through the window, I could see Tanya walking out of the museum and away down the street, presumably on her lunch break. This was my chance to persuade her to talk. I turned back to my laptop to close it. And that's when my eye caught a name on the list. A name that turned the world upside down and made my blood run cold.
About 2 hours after I left Ben, the TV producer, to his Bloody Mary in his Pall Mall club, I got a call.
Mr. Hayward, I have information for you.
Who is this?
I have information on the radio broadcast. Meet me at level 6 of the Bloomsbury Square car park in 30 minutes.
I don't understand. Did Ben contact you? Bloomsbury Square car park is designed like a corkscrew, winding down and down into the ground beneath London with no corners, so that from any one spot you can't see very far up or down before the driveway curves away from you. The first thing I see as I step out into the corkscrew is a fox, standing on the roof of a dusty, dented car. Its eyes glow as it stares at me. This far down, the car park is pretty much deserted, save for cars that have been all but abandoned down here for days or weeks. Rushing over here to meet the 30-minute deadline hasn't given me very much time to worry. But now the anxiety comes flooding in. I'm alone, deep underground, and I don't know who I'm meeting or what their intention is.
Stay where you are.
Her voice was coming from a speaker somewhere over on my right, down a slope. It was dark down there and I couldn't see where it was. I'm recording this.
That's okay.
Well, it's not, because I can't pick you up properly on the mic. I need to be closer. Hello?
Take 4 paces forward.
Yeah. What should I call you?
I don't care what you call me. The broadcast you heard. Babylon.
Babylon?
It's being broadcast locally.
From Orford Ness?
I don't know. There's not supposed to be anything there now.
Who's sending it?
The who isn't important. It's the why.
Okay, why?
You're nearly onto something, but you're in danger of going down the wrong path. Listen out for the phrase Pleasant Green.
What's that?
Pleasant Green and Babylon. If you're following that trail, you're going in the right direction. And don't trust the woman.
What woman?
The researcher. Kennedy Fisher.
But don't trust Kennedy. Hello? Jesus!
I kept my distance from Tanya Ratcliffe and followed her as she walked along the main street of Dunwich, heading towards the beach. But before she got to the beach, she turned off into a footpath that led uphill through trees. The footpath was narrow and uneven, and it wound up through the trees above the beach. I was torn between not getting too close because I didn't want to spook Tanya, and being close enough that I didn't lose her if she took a turn out of sight. As it was, I did lose sight of her, and I hustled to catch up, only to nearly run into her at the top of the path. She was standing just off the trail, at the edge of the cliff, looking out across the sea.
Miss Ratcliffe?
You want to know about Henry?
She said this without turning around. I guess she'd already spotted me.
700 years ago, we'd have been looking down at a town, a mile across. A port, trade, shipbuilding. And now there's nothing left of it. They say you can still hear the church bells ringing sometimes under the water. This is where it arrived.
Where what arrived?
It travelled overland for weeks and weeks, and then they put it on a ship, and it came here.
What are we talking about?
You don't know what any of this is about, do you?
Not yet. I'm looking for Henry Akeley.
You won't find him.
Why not?
They won't let you. This is how they cover their tracks. A whole town dumped into the sea.
I thought that was storms.
Storms. The government, aliens. There's always an explanation, but never the truth.
What is the truth? You can talk to me, Tanya. What's the truth?
The truth is Babylon.
I don't know what that is.
No, you don't know anything.
I know you have Barbara Sayers' phone number in your contact list. Funny story. I met her last year in Rhode Island, and she tried to kill me. Small world, huh? How do you know Barbara? Tanya Ratcliffe looked at me for what felt like quite a few seconds. She'd gone pale at the mention of Barbara Sayers, and I thought she was finally going to talk to me straight. But then she turned away and walked right off the edge of the cliff.
Alright, as you can see, I'm still going here, so I'm just going to crack on into episode 4. But I do need to take a short break. Alright, I just went to refill my coffee cup. As you can see, I'm right back here, we haven't moved. So here we go, episode 4 of The Whisper in Darkness.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Wednesday, the 15th of May. It's coming up to 6:15 in the evening. I was out most of the day. When I got home, I knew someone had been in the house. Again. They hadn't taken anything that I could see, but the radio was back on, and some things on the desk had been moved around, just a little bit, but just enough that I could tell. I wonder if they do that on purpose, so that I know that they've been here. The doors and windows are all warded, and the proximity gizmo on the front door didn't register anyone coming in, but they were here. I don't know how they get past the wards. I've seen that black car again a few times over the last few days. Once it was parked outside the church. I'm worried about Wilmoth. I never intended to drag him into all this.
Pleasant Green and Babylon. If you're following that trail, you're going in the right direction. And don't trust the woman.
What woman?
The researcher, Kennedy Fisher.
Don't trust Kennedy. Hello? Jesus Christ!
They're not down here, Mr. Pasty.
Okay, unit X2, we'll regroup there.
I waited underneath a parked car for the better part of an hour, until I was as certain as I could be that whoever those people were, they had stopped looking for me. I didn't know who the mystery woman I'd met down there was. I didn't know who the people who arrived were, whether they were after me or her. But all of that could wait. Right now, I just wanted to be out of that place. I don't know if anyone has ever been so glad to step out into a grey London day.
Hi, you've reached Kennedy Fisher. I'm not available at the moment, but leave a message and I'll call you back. I dialed 999 from the top of the cliff, and within 10 minutes, there was an ambulance down on the beach, and they were loading Tanya Ratcliffe's body into the back of it. The police came and found me, and I gave them a statement, and then they drove me to the police station, and I gave them another statement, and I played them the recording of the conversation with Tanya. I had to tell them about the show and about our investigations into Henry Akeley's disappearance, and that seemed to prompt a flurry of phone calls. I guess because another department somewhere had Akeley's disappearance as an ongoing thing. Hi, excuse me. Can you find out if they're done with me now? I'm sitting in the waiting area of a police station.
You can't record in here.
Where does it say that?
It doesn't say it, but you can't. Switch it off or I'll take it away from you.
They must have squared it all away because they let me go after a couple of hours. Once they were sure I wasn't going to skip the country and they could get a hold of me for whatever follow-up they needed to do.
Are you okay, though?
I'm fine. You?
We'd reconvened at the cafe across the road from the studio and swapped stories of our recent experiences.
This one's getting interesting, huh?
Yeah, maybe too interesting. Too quickly. I still don't have much of an idea what this is all about.
No, but we have Babylon.
Except we don't know what it means. And Pleasant Green, which I Googled, and there's no such place.
Maybe it's a code for something.
And then there's Barbara Sayers.
And if she's connected to any of this, then at least we know what general ballpark we're in.
One we don't want to be in.
What does that mean?
It means I spent a chunk of yesterday hiding under a car from people who clearly meant me harm.
You've had worse.
Yeah, and I didn't enjoy worse. Getting beaten up outside a pub is worse than hiding under a car for an hour. But I'd swap either one for sitting in a nice warm studio investigating a mystery that no one cares about.
You want to walk away?
No.
Okay then. Is there anything else your guy said that might be useful?
No.
It's just because the recording cut out for a few seconds. So
Yeah. That was just human error.
that's why you should stay in the nice warm studio. So let's find out what Babylon is.
When Kennedy refers to the few seconds where the recording cut out, that is the part where the mystery woman told me not to trust Kennedy Fisher. I didn't play her that bit. I pretended I'd messed up the recording. So now I have to take a moment to confuse the hell out of you. I wish this could all be nice and linear, but I'm afraid that's not going to work anymore. How this works, this podcast, is we go out and we research, talk to people, all the stuff you've been hearing, and then at the end, when we've got the series, we go back and we lay in the connecting tissue, the studio narration, the music, and so on. So what you're hearing right now, my voice, I'm recording this right at the end of that process. But this narration is going into episode 4, so you, the listener, don't know as much as I do about what happens and where this goes. We don't like to play this game generally. We like you to be in lockstep with us as we find stuff out. But the problem I have now is that I had begun a separate investigation at this point. An investigation into Kennedy Fisher. Honestly, I wasn't expecting to turn anything up, but that woman in the underground garage got me a bit spooked, and then Tanya Ratcliffe fell off that cliff, and... Let me play you that recording again.
The truth is Babylon.
I don't know what that is.
No, you don't know anything.
I know you have Barbara Sayers' phone number in your contact list. Funny story. I met her last year in Rhode Island, and she tried to kill me. Small world, huh? How do you know Barbara?
Actually, I don't really remember what I was thinking at the time. But we seemed to be standing on shifting sands, and I wanted to know what was solid and what wasn't. So I began a side investigation into Kennedy. And I'm telling you this now because, as I say, it's after the fact, so I'm able to drop that investigation into these episodes moving forward. And you just need to bear in mind that Kennedy was not aware of any of this happening at the time. Now is a different matter. I'm Matthew Hayward, and this is The Whisperer in Darkness.
Babylon, what, as in the place?
I don't know.
Or the hall?
I don't know. I caught the train down to Lewes in Sussex and paid a visit to Eleanor Peck in person. Not only had she put us on the trail of Henry Akeley in the first place, but she was the most likely person to know what Babylon was. Or so I thought.
Well, it could be anything, couldn't it? Who told you about it?
A woman called Tanya Ratcliffe, who was in a coven or whatever with Henry Akeley.
Well, I suppose if anyone was going to be prancing about in the woods, it'd be Henry. You're not concerned that you're getting sidetracked into the batshit fiction version of the world that Henry seemed to subscribe to?
Tanya Ratcliffe knew Barbara Sayers.
Oh.
Did Henry ever?
No, of course not. I would have said, especially because of what happened.
Yeah. Did Matt play the recording?
Of Henry? Yeah, I've had some of them.
No, the broadcast.
What broadcast?
We think it's maybe some kind of covert government signal. Matt probably thought it wasn't your thing, but Henry talks about it on his recording, so... Hold on, I have it here. It just repeats over and over.
Play again. Okay. You were mishearing it. It's not Babylon, it's Babylon. Babylon.
This means something to you?
This is a language, the broadcast. Enochian. It's a magical language, the language of the angels, supposedly. It comes from the Book of Enoch, which is one of the Gospels missing from the Bible.
Okay.
Is spelling out the word Babalon.
What does it mean?
Well, it's part of Aleister Crowley's Thelemic pantheon. Babylon is a goddess, kind of like Mother Earth, but also referencing the whore of Babylon. Crowley believed that she could be summoned into the body of a human woman.
I'm assuming he didn't manage to do that.
Not that we know of. Mostly he just wrote about it endlessly. It's all derived from the Enochian Magic John Dee and Edward Kelly performed in the 16th century.
You might need to slow down a little bit.
Okay. John Dee was a mathematician, astronomer, and occult philosopher. He was one of Elizabeth I's advisors.
Seriously?
Yeah. Remember, the line back then between science and magic was very blurry. Anyway, John Dee delivered a system called Enochian Magic, essentially performing rituals using angelic language. He talked about Babylon as this kind of evil elemental force, but of course it was all tied into suspicion of women and this notion that you're either a mother, a whore, or a witch. Crowley picked up on it and wrote about Babylon as a kind of earth goddess that could be summoned. The really interesting part of all this, though, is how Jack Parsons picked up the ball and ran with it.
Jack Parsons
was Californian rocket engineer. He developed a solid fuel system for the first rockets, but the US government shit-canned him for being a nutter. And he was a mate of Crowley's and belonged to this sex magic group out in Pasadena. Parsons attempted the Babylon working towards the end of 1945. He was working with an assistant, which is of passing interest because the assistant was an aspiring sci-fi novelist called L. Ron Hubbard.
No shit.
I know. Anyway, Parsons is halfway through the ritual when, at the beginning of 1946, this woman, Marjorie Cameron, shows up. She's this flame-haired babe, and Jack convinces himself she must have been sent to him by the forces of whatever as part of the ritual. So he sets about trying to impregnate her in the belief that the child would be the earthly manifestation of a goddess.
And they put this guy in charge of rockets?
Supposedly, Marjorie Cameron did get pregnant, but she had an abortion. Jack Parsons, meanwhile, had all his money stolen by Hubbard and then blew himself up in his garage mixing explosives for a film set. Marjorie Cameron is actually interesting, as she went on to become quite notable in the art world, was mates with a load of film stars in the 60s, and was considered something of an authority in the world of ufology, for whatever that's worth.
UFOs?
Oh, yeah. It's all tied in. Parsons claimed to have seen cylindrical objects floating in the sky all through his Babylon working. These people never met an unexplained phenomenon they couldn't work into their mythology. You've seen Crowley's drawing of Lamb.
What of what?
1918, Aleister Crowley is living in New York, just off Central Park. He attempted something called the Amalantra working, during which he claims to have summoned an entity called Lamb, which is supposedly some kind of ultimate evolution of the human species. Whatever. What's interesting is that Crowley drew a picture of Lamb. Hold on. I can Google it.
You should Google this right now. Pause this episode here and Google Crowley Lamb, L-A-M. What you're going to see is a drawing Aleister Crowley made in 1918, 29 years before Roswell, decades before people were reporting UFO abductions en masse. And yet this drawing looks exactly like the classic grey alien. It's really uncanny.
Spooky, isn't it? Nonsense, of course. These kind of images had been around earlier than 1918. There were already science fiction novels published with illustrations of aliens just like this one. Crowley would have seen those.
Okay, but if Amelia and Henry and the others were performing some kind of ritual the night these UFOs showed up in the forest, could that have been the Babylon working?
Who knows? I guess you'd have to ask them.
Hey Matt, how's it going?
Yeah, all good. This is a terrible line. Where are you?
Can't say, mate, sorry.
The person I was talking to was an old friend from college who joined the army and is currently stationed in the Middle East. I can't tell you his name for security reasons, which is also why he couldn't tell me where he was. When Kennedy went missing in Iraq, this was the guy I called to help find her.
You've not lost her again, have you?
No, it's actually about something else. What do you know about Orford Ness?
That's all a bit before my time, mate. Not sure I know anything you couldn't find out for yourself.
I'm just wondering if any part of it is still military.
Just for a story?
Yeah, we've
come across a numbers station, well, kind of, and I just wondered if it could be coming from there.
Okay, so that wouldn't necessarily be military so much as the spooks in Whitehall.
Okay, so we don't know why it would be broadcasting a child's voice spelling out the word Babylon in a mythical angelic language.
Oh, mate, I thought my job was weird. No, I have no idea what that's about. I'd love to tell you it couldn't possibly have anything to do with the intelligence services, but I've met some of those guys and they're all as mad as badgers, so who knows?
Okay, all right, worth a try.
Always. Your girl got back all right, though, yeah?
Well, she's not my girl, but yeah. She got hit by a scooter. She was out cold in a hospital for a couple of weeks.
You sure?
About what?
Where I work then, we got a daily list of non-Iraqis admitted to hospital. That's one of the first things I check.
Well, maybe she didn't have her ID on her.
Well, then she'd have been flagged as Jane Doe, and I'd have checked it out because I knew you were looking.
Well, maybe it was just an admin cock-up.
Well, that is more than likely. It's a clown's workshop out here, mate. Anyway, I'm glad she's back safe and sound, and I'm excited for the wedding.
No, it's not that. It's not that like that.
I'm pulling your leg, mate. It's all right.
Yeah. One other thing, it probably means nothing, but there's this phrase I've been given, and it occurred to me it might be some kind of code word or an operation of some kind.
Go on.
Pleasant Green.
Time's up, mate. Gotta go.
Wait, what? Wait.
That's an echelon code phrase. I've got to cut the line now.
Echelon is a satellite system developed by the US government and used by us, the Americans, and various other nations to listen in to phone calls, read emails and text messages, etc. Echelon doesn't listen to everything. Instead, it's loaded with keywords and phrases that trigger it to start recording. Traditionally, these phrases are tied into international terrorism, organised crime and espionage. For some reason, the phrase Pleasant Green had been set up as an Echelon trigger. That was worrying, but it also told me that, as my anonymous informant in the underground car park had said, we were on the right track. What stuck in my mind from the call to my military contact, though, was that Kennedy's name hadn't appeared on the patient lists of any Iraqi hospitals.
Hi, excuse me. Are you Walter Brown? Hello?
He's a big guy, dressed in an old pair of jeans, boots, and a battered wax cotton coat. His hair sits messily on his collar. He has his back to me, and I can't tell if he can't hear me or he's just ignoring me.
My name's Kennedy Fisher. I wanted to talk to you about Henry Akeley.
He finally turns around and looks at me. There's something about him. Something that seems almost not there. He's staring at me, and his eyes are this really pale blue, which I wasn't expecting as his hair was so dark. But his eyes seem empty. And then suddenly, it's like he snaps back into himself and gives me this beaming smile which transforms his entire demeanor, and he says,
"You're an American. Can I get you anything? Tea? Coffee? It's only instant. Water?"
No, I'm good, thank you.
The house is untidy, but it seems very clean. The curtains are closed, and the room we're in is therefore pretty dark, but Walter doesn't turn a lamp on.
Are you from one of the bases? Your parents, I mean.
Oh, no, I'm from London. I'm just here looking into Mr. Akeley's disappearance.
Well, I'm glad someone is.
You knew Henry?
Yes. I used to know him very well. These past few years, well, I think it's fair to say he changed.
Changed how?
I don't know how much you know about Henry's past, and I wouldn't want to speak out of turn.
Are you talking about the drugs or the magic rituals?
Okay, it sounds like you know all of it. So, yes, Henry and I were very close for a long time. We went to school together, in fact, and we grew up near each other, so we were friends throughout our childhood. And then Henry fell in with these magical types.
Amelia Fenner.
Amelia, yes. Perfectly nice woman. Bit balmy, but Henry was quite enthralled by her, and he encouraged me to come along to one of their gatherings, and Well, I suppose I didn't have anything better to do, and it seemed like something interesting, out of the ordinary, you know. I was never really into the drugs thing like Henry was. I smoked a bit of pot, but so did everyone. But when it came to mind-altering whatever, I think, to be honest, I was a bit scared of all that. There were these stories at the time of people taking LSD and jumping off of buildings because they thought they could fly. And I suppose that was all in the back of my mind, and I just didn't fancy it. Bad trips, they used to call them.
I think they still do.
So we would go into the woods and Amelia would scratch some symbols into the dirt and we'd sit around and she would read stuff out of this old book. It all seemed a bit silly to me. Probably because I wasn't taking the stuff they were taking. But they all got very into it, and I suppose I was at least able to fulfil the function of making sure no one hurt themselves or whatever.
You were there with them over Christmas in 1980?
I was, yes.
And?
Are you going to ask me if I saw a UFO?
Well, I was going to ask what happened, but...
But that's where you were heading. No, I didn't see a UFO. I don't believe anyone saw one.
Not even the US Air Force guys?
Oh, I couldn't say what they saw. I meant the people in our little group. What we saw were flashes of light amongst the trees. We heard engines and voices.
You saw the USAF people searching.
Exactly right. That's what I saw, and I was stone cold sober that night. What the others saw, or rather what they interpreted under the influence of the pills Amelia had given them.
What did they think they saw?
At the time, they thought they'd summoned an angel, something called Babylon. That was what the ritual was all about. But then afterwards, there were all these reports of UFOs in the forest, so they decided that that must be what they'd seen. And then they reasoned that actually the UFOs were Babylon, and honestly, it all seemed pretty harmless at the time.
But you told them what you'd seen?
Oh, yes. But you see, my eyes were not to be trusted because they said the boundaries to my consciousness were up, because I hadn't opened myself up to the experience. So apparently I had in fact seen this Babylon, but my rational brain had refused to accept it. And that's why I had chosen to interpret the vision as Air Force men with torches. You can't win, really.
Walter said that this was the beginning of the end of his friendship with Henry Akeley.
None of them could let this go. And Amelia left soon after. I don't know where she went. But that meant there was no one to hold the group together. Tommy Marston had a complete breakdown. Apparently he went off to America for a while, and then he came back and, well, I presume you know he killed himself.
I heard, yes.
Tanya Ratcliffe moved away. She didn't go far, to be fair, but she distanced herself. And all the joy just seemed to have left her. And then there was Henry. And he was just so determined to prove that there was something in those woods. He was so sure that some kind of portal or gate had been opened that night. And he thought that whatever had come through had not gone back, because we never did a banishing ritual. So he was off in the forest every day looking for it.
And this was just flashlights?
All we saw was some men with torches. Whether those men were chasing a lighthouse beacon or some kind of experimental aircraft, they could have been chasing actual Martians for all I know. All I can say with 100% certainty is that no one in our group saw anything other than men with torches.
You heard what happened to Tanya?
I did. Poor old girl. She went up to Dunwich chasing that ridiculous book.
Which book?
The Necronomicon. It was all Amelia Fenner ever talked about, and she had all of them obsessed with it by the end. Tanya got it into her head that the thing came into England through Dunwich, however many centuries ago. Are you all right?
Yes, sorry.
You've gone pale. Are you sure I can't get you some water?
Thank you. I'm okay. So, in more recent times, with Henry Akeley?
Well, we were virtually strangers. I'd see him often enough, walking past here or heading up into the forest. But I'd long ago given up trying to engage with him, really. Once or twice more recently, I tried again because he was looking so unwell.
In what way?
Tired, I suppose. Drawn. His face had become quite gaunt, and there was something in his eyes. This strange sort of haunted look. I was worried about him because we had once been such great friends, you know. So I did try to connect with him again, but it's as if he saw me as an enemy now. Perhaps because I was the one still doubting what had happened back in 1980.
So he just ignored you?
Most of the time. Occasionally he'd rant at me how I'd killed his dogs, how I was tormenting him, how I was one of them, whoever they are. So I took a step back. I kept an eye on him, but I kept my distance.
And what do you think happened to him?
You're talking about a man nearly 70 years old with a history of drug abuse and this experience with the occult that, whatever you or I might think of it, clearly had a profound effect on him. Henry has mental health issues, severe mental health issues, and I'm afraid this country no longer provides care for people like him, at least not the level of care they need. I think he's gone somewhere. Whether he knows where he is or why he's there, he could be sleeping in a doorway or at a shelter somewhere under another name. We have to face the fact that he might be dead.
And you don't think there's anything to any of these other explanations?
The magic stuff? I was there. It didn't happen, Miss Fisher. It was men with torches.
Good evening, sir. Can I help you? Excuse me, sir. You can't.
I thought I'd find you here.
Mr. Hayward, an unexpected pleasure.
I'm very sorry,
I want
Mr.
some answers, and I'm not going anywhere until I get them.
Good for you.
Sir, you can't just come barging in.
Stand down, Maria, thank you. Mr. Hayward is my guest. Have a seat, Matthew. Do you prefer Matt?
I prefer Mr. Hayward.
What can we get you? Scotch, perhaps, to calm your nerves. Are you hungry? Pigeon's very good this evening. Ricardo makes it with a plum sauce, which is surprisingly
No, I'm
subtle.
not hungry, and I don't want to drink.
You want answers?
Yes, that's right.
To which question?
Babylon.
Is that a question?
And Pleasant Green.
Well, now.
Why is that an echelon trigger?
No, I'm the one who needs a scotch. Paolo, would you mind? A woman arranged to meet with you.
Yes. Yes. Who was she?
For the benefit of the tape, I'm shaking my head.
I said I wanted answers.
You did, but you're not in a position to compel them. The woman you met is trustworthy.
And what about the people who crashed that meeting?
Less so. Although I suppose that's subjective. Depends whose side you're on.
So there are two sides to this?
To everything, surely.
What is it?
What is...
Stop playing games!
Fine. You have a missing gentleman, Henry Akeley. And you've discovered that he was keeping less than savoury company. There is a radio broadcast in a language no one speaks and that spells out the word Babylon, which I'm sure you have by now gathered is of some esoteric significance to certain parties.
I know what I know. What is Pleasant Green?
You're going too far, too fast, Mr. Hayward.
What is Pleasant Green?
I don't know, and that is the truth. I know it's an echelon trigger, and I know that whatever it is classified above the clearance level of anyone I've ever met.
So it's government or military?
I would say so.
Who do I talk to?
No one will talk to you about this.
No, I wouldn't bet on that. Someone always wants to talk. Should I mention your name when I find that person?
That's an empty threat, Mr. Hayward. No one at that level cares about a minnow like me. But like I say, too far, too fast. You're looking for Henry Akeley, yes? Well then put the pieces you already have together. A ritual performed by Akeley's group over the Christmas period in 1980.
How do you know about that?
And what would you surmise to be the nature of that ritual?
A Babylon working?
That would seem to be a good guess. And the result?
Result? You think what happened in the
I
forest?
don't think anything. I'm merely following your own line of speculation. Post hoc, ergo propter hoc. After it, therefore, because of it. A ritual is performed, a summoning, and then something appears in the forest.
You think they summoned aliens?
No, I think that would be ridiculous. But if I didn't, if I was someone who thought it was plausible, aliens, or something that appeared to be alien, and I was in a position of power, and I had the resources to try to replicate that result on a larger scale.
If you had a top-secret weapons testing facility in the area.
Or access to one because of my position.
Who would that person be?
Someone high up.
Like a cabinet secretary?
Godfrey Tillinghast is dead. And anyway, you're thinking too small. There are levels far above Tillinghast. Names even someone like him wouldn't have known.
So who knows them?
And this is why I say you're going too far, too fast. You're looking for someone who knows someone. Perhaps instead, you should be looking for the man who already found out this information.
Henry Akeley.
I went back to the vicarage to talk with Albert Wilmarth. Albert had warned me away from Walter Brown, so I was interested to find out exactly what it was about this seemingly pleasant man I might have missed.
Well, I know he's been in trouble with the police on a number of occasions. Not recently, I should add.
What kind of trouble?
Mr. Brown had a history of violence.
Well, I didn't get any sense of that. Quite the opposite.
I know Henry had issues with him.
Yes, we talked about that, and it does sound like a lot of that was in Henry's mind. Having met Tanya Ratcliffe and knowing what I know about Amelia Fenner and about Henry, Walter Brown certainly seems like the most level-headed of the bunch. He was actually charming.
But you're sure you didn't knock on the next-door neighbour's house by mistake?
He actually agreed with you. He thinks this whole thing is about Henry having mental health problems and going off somewhere.
Well, that's Occam's razor.
He did say one interesting thing. He said that Tanya Ratcliffe had gone off to Dunwich because she believed that the Necronomicon had entered the country there centuries ago.
The Necronomicon? Is that even real?
Well, I've met people who think it is.
I suppose, if that's true, and this Babylon, whatever it is, has a connection to John Dee...
Well, it was his ritual, apparently.
Didn't I read somewhere that the Necronomicon was supposed to have been translated into English by Dee back in the 16th century?
I don't know.
But if it does exist, or did, and it came in through Suffolk, that would explain some things.
What would it explain?
Well, the explosion of witchcraft in the area, for one. And some of the folk tales, maybe.
Like what?
Have you heard of the Wild Man of Orford?
No, but I'm staying in Orford.
Well, then you know the castle. The story goes that sometime during the reign of Henry II, so late 1100s, some fishermen out near what is now Orford Ness caught a man in their nets. Kind of a merman, I suppose, a man with the ability to live in water. He was taken to Orford Castle and presumably interrogated, but he escaped into the river and was never seen again.
Okay.
And there are a surprising number of similar folk tales around this area about beings like this. I bring it up because the stories in your last season...
You listened to the last season?
Yeah, I thought I should. I do have some questions, but anyway. You talk about the guy who was supposed to have written the Necronomicon.
Alhazred.
Yeah. He claimed the secrets he put into that book were given to him by a race of people he discovered beneath the desert.
Okay, but that's not...
No, I'm not suggesting it's true, but you seem to be making the point in your show that there's a difference between what's true and what people believe.
Yes.
Well, if Amelia Fenner and her gang believed that the Necronomicon was here somewhere, or had been, and they believed that it was the source or the cause somehow of the folk stories of the area, and they acted on that belief...
To what end?
Oh, I don't know. It's easy to get sucked into this stuff, isn't it? I suppose what I was heading towards, what might have been banging on Henry Akeley's door...
Mermaids?
Yeah, that's why I stopped myself.
I don't think Henry Akeley was abducted by mermaids, Albert.
By the time I left the vicarage, the sun was starting to go down, and I was back to thinking that all of this was just the sad story of an old man with mental health issues. I drove up the road past Walter Brown's house. Walter was out in his garden again. So I slowed down and hooted and waved, and he turned and looked at me. But he was like he'd been the first time I saw him. A blank expression with these empty eyes, and he seemed to be looking right through me without any sign of recognition. It was weird, but I figured maybe he just didn't recognize me in the car. So I carried on past Henry Akeley's house. There were no lights on, no signs of life. I didn't really know where we should go next. My investigation had come full circle. The radio broadcast could have been anything. Matthew's adventures with military intelligence could have been something tangential that we'd stumbled on but which had nothing to do with Henry Akeley. There was something quite comforting in the notion that this might not be a story about the occult and aliens. But then I thought about Tanya Ratcliffe jumping off that cliff, and I knew there must be something more to all of this. I turned onto the road that leads back to Orford and my hotel. There was a black saloon car parked at the side of the road, and beside it, a woman dressed in black wearing little round sunglasses, watching me. And that's the last thing I remember.
All right. Great stuff. Phew! Digging deeper and deeper. Well, it looks like I've done all the drilling and lathe work on this reading pipe, so we've got more work to do elsewhere. But we're done for now until next week. Let's see where it goes. All right. Until next time, take it easy. See you soon.